Charlotte Pascoe, you are an Australian letting and estate agent who grew, before your current role, your lettings role from 280 managed properties to 2,000 managed properties in 3 years. How did you do it? Talk to me.
So I was working in an organisation, and my colleague and I, we went down the path of trying to find the one that can bring us many. So instead of spending your life trying to focus on that one person, we were looking outside of that. So how do we find someone who has 10, 15, 20 properties? So creating referral networks, getting to know developers who were building these high-rise projects, and they would have all these investment properties in there. So becoming the agent of choice, I guess you would say. I created my own networking groups, but it effectively came back to that whole Australian thing of it's the person. So I spent my time creating relationships. I had so much coffee and wine, and I can't even count the number of lunches that I had, creating relationships. So then it just became, oh, hey, Charlotte, I've got another property. Oh, hey, Charlotte, I've got another development.
This is unheard of with letting agents in the UK.
It's not so common in Australia either. We do have a lot of people who are growth people, but that means they get a listing or a referral from a salesperson and they convert it into a letting. But that outbound call, that prospecting side of things,
Letting agents don't prospect. I know I surprised you in a previous video. Some sales agents do a few sales prospecting. Hardly any letting agents. Do prospecting. Would it be? In the UK, a landlord will not swap letting agents halfway through a tenancy. Is that pretty?
There is a stigma in Australia that it's too hard. So as an agent, it's our job to educate people that it's actually an easy thing to do. If you're not happy with the management that you've got, you can transition at any point without penalty.
Quite often, most agents will sign into their agreement with the landlord that if you swap halfway through a tenancy, you have to pay off the rest of the fee.
Yeah, you can't do that.
You can't.
Although every state's different in Australia, so there are different legislations. So in Western Australia, for example, you are locked into a fixed term contract between the landlord and the agent. Whereas in Victoria, you can twiddle on off.
Okay, so the ones that you can't, did you say Western Australia?
Western Australia, you can't.
Okay. Would you say they're just as easy to get using your techniques you used?
Yeah, but it's just you've got to play a longer game.
Okay, but aren't the best things in life playing the long game?
Absolutely.
So
some of the relationships, I spent a year and a half on one developer in Melbourne, but he ended up giving me 350 odd properties. But it became absolutely all about the relationship.
So what you see, the problem with most letting agents is that they are more detail orientated, systems orientated, as opposed to people orientated, and they're quite reserved, which means they are precise, they like to get everything right, they're perfectionists, not very good at even cold calling or being proactive in their business. We have Facebook groups for letting agents. You put a video or a technique on how to get more landlords and you'll get a couple of likes, but you put a comment on saying, my tenant hasn't paid their rent, should I use this legislation or this legislation? And it's like a tramp on chips. They're all on it, basically saying, oh, you should do this, you should do this, you should use this section of notice, should this section notice.
Yeah.
Are letting agents similar in Oz?
Yeah, but our structure's quite different. So we will have a letting agent who is someone it's an entry-level job. It's an assistant role. So somebody who's out there doing open for inspections, checking application forms, doing all that kind of thing is more of an entry-level job. You've then got a property manager who does end-to-end of everything in that portfolio. We do
that's move in, check out, make sure that if there's a leaky roof. Is their job to bring the new business in?
It depends on the owner's structure of that business. Okay. A lot of owners would like to think it is. I talk a lot about the fact that people who have an admin-based mind are not a salesperson. So do they actually?
Do they? Because it is unheard of to have business development people in letting agencies. I can think of. I'm pretty well known in the industry. I'm connected with an awful lot of people. I can think of two.
When I started doing business development, it was at a company. It's because
there's job is not the boss, not the equity partner,
just to bring on business.
Yes, two.
So I started that a job. My first growth role was probably about 16 years ago, and
when you were a child.
When I was a child, again, I started when I was 2, and that company was one of the first to do it. They really pioneered that job, because when I started talking to people about it, they were like, what do you mean? And now it's a much more appreciated role, and there's a lot of companies putting them on because they see that your asset is the rent roll.
Yes.
So when the market goes from here in sales down here, you feel the pinch, so you want to grow that asset a
What
little bit more.
skills do you need to be a business generator in lettings when because you need resilience, the gift of the gab, yet at the same time we are very guilty as an industry in the UK of paying for short-term things when it's the long-term things. What's the type of personality and how do you reward them?
So it would be the same structure as what we do with a salesperson. So their job is to be on the phone, to be attending open for inspections of sales home, finding investors, turning it into a buyer's advocacy type role, helping them find something.
But you might not get anything for 6 months.
Well, you should. You absolutely should. So their job is to bring in the new business. So there would be expectations.
For lettings?
Yeah, there'd be an expectations that you bring on 10 to 15 new properties a month in some businesses. Some of them where I used to work, it was 100 a month.
This unheard of.
So the sales process that we have for a salesperson who comes in, they prospect, list, negotiate, and sell. We have the same thing. It's prospect, list, negotiate, and rent.
Okay, so in the UK, you have the mostly females, because that tends to attract that part of the demographic, whose job is to basically be a lettings negotiator, whose job is to basically arrange viewings on properties, making sure sending again, no accompanied viewings. You'll probably just send it off to the tenant that's moving out, which I know will make you laugh.
Yep.
And then his job is then to take the rent, sort the paperwork out, move them in. Once they've moved in, it will pass on to someone else who is almost like a lettings manager, whose job it is just to look after the business, just look after the tenants that are in the properties.
That's a property manager in our
Yeah,
terminology.
some people call them property manager. There'll be no one in the office whose job it is to bring new business in. None.
15 years ago, that was pretty similar to Melbourne.
Yeah, the boss will probably chuck a few adverts in saying landlords wanted.
Yeah. More properties wanted.
Yes,
yeah,
landlords wanted.
Love that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was where we were 15 years ago.
How did it change?
Because I think people started realising that an admin-based person is not a growth person. So you've really got to identify that. But again, it comes down to the individual and having them being accountable, setting KPIs and expectations.
What skill set? Because a growth person, as you would call it, or a salesperson.
Sales and negotiation. They need to be negotiating on your fee structure. They need to be telling them, why list with me? What is it that, that I can do that the other 4 agents that you've spoken to can't do? It is a sales position.
But how do you get hold of these landlords if you don't know where they are?
You phone them. You prospect, you find them.
Because
you go through your database. You've got databases sitting there.
It shocks me that most letting agents know the name and address of every single landlord in there, because their sales department will have, if they've been around a long time, I don't know about you, it shocks me about estate agents' databases that they archive them within 2 seconds if someone doesn't ring up.
So here's a question. When was the last time the agents here picked up the phone and said, "Hi, Mr. Landlord, touching base, wanting to check out where you're up to, do a bit of a health check. Are you considering expanding your portfolio? Do you know anyone who has a property? How are you finding the experience? Are we checking out the net promoter scores, for example? Are we looking at the service? Are they raving fans of who we are, or do they think we're pretty average? If they think we're average...
It sounds really simple.
It is very simple. Real estate's not hard. It's just hard work.